Morning, everyone. It's Rev Deanna Cox here for your midweek reflection for November the 10th. With tomorrow being Remembrance Day, I wanted to talk about peace, and it's fitting. We had a board meeting in Killam last night, and part of the devotion was about let the folk song, Let Peace Begin With Me. And that started me thinking about what I wanted to share with you today, especially considering that Remembrance Day is tomorrow. And our passage for this week is the same as last week. It's Matthew 5:38-48, and the passage about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And at first, it might seem like that passage has very little to do with peace and Remembrance Day, but actually it has a lot. It doesn't sound like it, but it goes, if you go deeper into the cultural context of the society at the time, at Jesus' time when this was written, and we'll talk more about this on Sunday, but if you go into the cultural context, you understand that this statement, there is a piece of justice to it because it limited the retaliation that one could do if they were harmed. So I always talk about I remember as a kid riding the bus and, your seatmates would get bantering back and forth and, you'd, oh, stop it, and you'd smack them. And then they'd get upset and they'd hit you back and say, well, you hit me this hard, and just, right? And so an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was limiting the depth of retaliation that could happen when a harm was done. It had to fit the crime, so to speak. A lot of our modern sentencing and stuff like that is kind of aligned with that, or rooted in that, initially. And so there was some sort of justice piece to it. Is you couldn't just go and burn somebody's house down if they stole an egg from you. So there was some justice calling in there. But it also was, when we get to the part about turning the other cheek, there was something about in the laws of etiquette and how we would carry ourselves in the world, how we conduct ourselves in the world. There were laws about how you could enact some of these things. And again, if you go back into cultural context, it was often the powerful and the privileged enacting this in how they treated their slaves or their employees, or like the people that were beneath them. It's a messy, ugly system, but that's how it was. And so one of the things was that you could, if you slapped your servant, it had to be with the open hand. You couldn't backhand them. And so when we get to the passage about turning the other cheek, that with the right hand, and you turn your left cheek also, there's no way they could slap you again unless they slapped with the back of the hand. And so what comes across as a very seemingly passive and submissive action, turn the other cheek and just let them hit you, is actually a really bold statement of resistance. Because in doing that, yes, it looks submissive, but it is actually a daring act of resistance. Because if they do choose to slap with the back of the hand, then they are publicly embarrassing themselves, and the power shifts. And So I find that piece really interesting as well, and interesting as we reflect and remember on Remembrance Day about places of power in our history and places of power in our lives, in our world today. The other thing that this passage, Matthew 5:38-48, the other thing that it calls us to is to remember, like it says, do not retaliate against an evildoer or an oppressor or an aggressor. Don't respond to them. How many times did your parents tell you if you don't react to your siblings, that they'll leave you alone? I know mine told me that a lot. I'm not sure it worked, but they said it anyways. It calls us not to act against our aggressor, but instead to love, to offer prayer. And what that is actually doing is calling us to eliminate the aggression. I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you're in a conversation with someone and they're starting to get upset, what happens to you? You get upset, and then pretty soon the energies and the voices are rising. And so if you are able to just take a deep breath and stay calm, it eliminates that aggression to start with. And not always, I realize that's idealistic, but this is what we are called to do as people of faith. That instead of retaliating, we are called to eliminate the aggression through love and prayer. It's a reminder of God's promise to love us unconditionally, and then in return, as children of God, we are called to do the same. So, this Remembrance Day, which is tomorrow, may we remember all the acts of oppression and aggression and the subsequent retaliation that have occurred in our world throughout history. May we remember all who served and all who gave of their lives in that service to their countries. May we remember that there are still many, many places in our world torn apart by violence, still thousands of people dominated by oppression and acts of aggression, and that there are still many people serving in the name of peace. And as we remember them and remember the fullness of our history, may we open our hearts to loving as God loves us. May we open our hearts to loving our enemies, and perhaps one day putting an end to acts of aggression through love and prayer and kindness and compassion and understanding. Well, friends, thank you so much for joining me today for our midweek reflection. I encourage you to tune in and check out the Sunday service when we get it up on our YouTube channel. And as a way of spreading love, I also encourage you that if you think you might know somebody who would appreciate the messages and reflections that we have, that you be bold and daring, and that you invite them to check out our YouTube or Facebook page. Take care, everyone. We'll see you on Sunday. God bless. Bye.